sort of research that talked about how high kids could count, what kind of math they could do, where it got frustrating or difficult versus where it was sort of a fun learning experience. And so what we decided was that we wanted to use a D6 instead of something higher, because it was really easy for kids of all ages to grasp. There wasn't a lot of math. It didn't require two numerals, and so we started with Cipher System, but then we broke it down. And even the sentence that the Cipher System, which is "I'm a blank blank who blanks," we started saying, all right, well, if you're a 4-year-old, being just "I'm a blank" is enough, right? That's enough cool, interesting things for you to capture. And then, as you get to a little older, you can do "I'm a blank blank," and then "I'm a blank blank who blanks." So I'm an awesome knight who, slays dragons, or whatever it is. But by using the step process, we were able to kind of incorporate all ages and make sure that there was an advancement that kept people interested in. So yeah, we sort of started with Cipher System, but then we really just did our research and moved it into a place where it felt right for kids who were still kind of maybe struggling with math concepts, struggling with reading, struggling with all those things. We really wanted it to be accessible, no matter kind of what level they were at.
That's awesome, and like I said, from the feedback both that I've seen on Twitter and especially from some of the people hanging out in chat, it looks like you guys kind of settled on something that really manages to connect with kids, especially.
That's awesome.
Which I am fully in support of.
And hopefully parents too. We have had some parents say, "My child wants to play this every night. Thank you very much." And I'm like, that's kind of awesome, and I'm sorry all at the same time.
Yeah, don't end up like me, and don't let your kid play 5 nights a week of role-playing games. It's not healthy.
But it might be. I mean, the amount of empathy that we learn as human beings by pretending to be someone else is huge. It's vast. And I mean, I know for me, like, I learned so much about the world and words. I mean, so many words that I didn't know. And as a reader, of course, didn't know how to pronounce like melee or paladin. Like, I was an adult before I figured out that those were the same words as the ones that I had read as kids. So, 5 nights a week, maybe that's awesome.
There's a lot of great things.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just because there's a lot of great things that role-playing games teach. Reading and math, obviously. But if you think about it, every role-playing game session that you sit down to play is an exercise in sort of group problem solving, and really that's what an awful lot of us do, like in our daily lives, in our jobs, right?
Oh yeah.
And so learning how to do that, how to work with a group, how to figure out, well, you're best to do this part of the solution and you're best to do this other part. I mean, that's what role-playing is all about, and those are valuable life skills.
Yeah, it's it was one of those. It wasn't the only thing, because my parents kind of spoiled me when I was a kid. They not only did my dad give me the old role playing games that he played when he was in college, but my mom also gave me her collection of books. So I was into like Robert Louis Stevenson and Dickens like back when I was a kid, and so I kind of got spoiled on that. But when I was growing up, it was was one of those things that just sort of it let you it taught a lot of things about how to work with other people, how to solve problems, not just like solve actual challenges, but solve interpersonal problems too, because a lot of gaming is kind of learning to deal with and settle problems, not just with dice, but also between the group of people who are sitting at the table who may all have conflicting views about how to do something.
For sure, right? Yeah, it's all about compromise and group structure, and yeah, I mean, role-playing is a fantastic thing for kids, I guess, and adults, but I think particularly for kids.
Yeah, I haven't done it myself because I have no time to do anything anymore. But I do have friends. One of them, I have friends who are in education and stuff, and I know at least one of them has had success bringing. I don't know her exact curriculum, but she's done some work to bring sort of role-playing games into I don't know whether it's an official curriculum or just, you know, school as an official activity or something like that. But I know she's putting in work to do that, and she's had a lot of success doing it. So yeah, I mean, I'm all on board. But that's also because, like, anything that gets me more people that I can feed into my Tomb of Horrors later, you know, I'm in support of.
Exactly. That's what all gamers are doing when they're having kids, right? They're just kind of building their own game group.
Yeah, or training the person so they can, like, I'm gonna train someone so they can DM for me because no one else will do it.
That is so true.
There we go.
So yeah, I do. There's, like I said, there's a ton of Cypher System products and stuff. I know you guys are working on. You guys have a bunch of stuff coming out for Cypher System. Things like the Explorer's Guide and other stuff. I mean, do you like what kind of stuff do you like? Are you working on? Are you creating like player options? Are you creating setting guides for your system? Like, you know, conversion guides?
Yes. So we just are coming out with a product for Numenera called Character Options 2. We already did one that was Character Options. And this has all kinds of new choices for the character to make. Shauna mentioned briefly that in the Cypher system, when you create your character, you're creating a sentence, right? You're a blank blank who blanks, right? So you are a strong-willed glaive who masters weaponry, or, you know, something else. And each one of those sort of blanks that you're filling in is a different different character option. So these books have new and exciting options, and they're you know, the new one that is coming out. We just got a printer proof copy literally today, actually, and we're very excited about it. It's going to come out. It's got some brand new character types, which are kind of the core, you know, of a Numenera character. So that's very exciting for people who play that game. And we just at Gen Con came out with a book that you mentioned, the Torment Explorer's Guide. Shauna, why don't you tell them first what Torment is, and then talk about the Explorer's Guide.
So when we were doing a Numenera Kickstarter right out of the gate, right in the middle of the Kickstarter, this fantastic company called In Exile came to us and wanted to talk about making Numenera into a video game. And it's a lot of the team that Monte's worked with in the past, and so we were really excited, and so we said yes. And so they've been working on Torment Tides of Numenera, which comes out early next year for both PC and consoles, which is really exciting. And to kind of accompany the computer game, we came out with Torment Tides of Numenera, the Explorer's Guide, which, like Monte said, just came out in August. And it is a really cool way of taking so it's really fun, right? Because they took the tabletop game, made it a computer game, and then we took some of the computer game and turned it back into tabletop. So it's very much a setting book, lots of great new places to explore, lots of cool new people. It also has some character options in it, as well as some new creatures. We kept it mostly spoiler-free, and so it is readable even if you want to play the game and don't want to be spoiled. But it's also a great book to have even if you don't want to play the computer game. It expands the Numenera world in really cool ways, lots of Ninth World elements, and it has some additional optional rules that are tied into the computer game, including like the tides, which are a big part of it. And so that was really fun. And that will also be I was going to say that will also be out. That's out in stores right now, I think. Is that right, Monte? Yeah.
I think it's getting to stores now.
Right. So it should be. I think it's just arriving. Our pre-orders just came out. So we've been working on that. And then, you know, we have a kind of an amazingly productive team, considering that there's really only 3 of us who design stuff plus an editor, and so and only one art director who's utterly amazing. So sometimes I look at the amount of stuff that we put out and I'm just kind of blown away. So, for example, we're working on we have 2 Kickstarters that we're still fulfilling. We fulfilled, I think, 4 other ones now, 5 other ones.
It'd be 4.
This is our 8th. So we have 2 left that we are fulfilling, and so is that right? So right now we're working on one is, like I said, I'm working on the book about dinosaurs, which is for the Cipher System Kickstarter that we did, and then we're also working on Into the Outside, which is from the Kickstarter into the Ninth World. And so we have all these pieces that are kind of moving behind the scenes. So like we just got character options 2 today from the printer, and then we have these 3 books that are kind of in flux, and then Monty's working on Invisible Sun. And so it feels like we're this beautiful, well-oiled creative machine, which I kind of love.
Let's keep that illusion going that we are this beautiful, well-oiled machine.
She says, I have a deadline tomorrow that I'm panicking about, but other than that, it's really well-oiled.
Trust, I absolutely sympathize. No one really, you don't really discuss what goes on in behind the scenes, but it's never organized or. Or what, like, everyone, like, oh, as long as things show up in people's hands on time, they assume everything is cool, but behind the scenes it's a mess. Trust me, I used to work in video games, I used to work in comics, I know how it is. So actually I'm really interested because, as I mentioned before, one of the things I love discussing is I love everything about DMing, and I'm really interested because I know my friends over at Counter Roleplay run a lot of Numenera and other stuff like that, and Cipher System stuff. Mitch and Finbar are really big into those. I've never had a chance to sit down for one of those games, so I'm really interested in how how those games are designed to sort of be to run on a DM side, or I guess what kind of aspects of running a game they're designed to appeal to or to kind of to center around.
Well, so this is true of basically all Monte Cook games, and that is that we focus really on making games that are fun and easy to be the game master for. I'm also someone who game mastering is very important to me. I've been the game master in the vast majority of games that I have played in. I wrote the 3rd edition Dungeon Master's Guide. So it's a topic that's very, very important to me. So some of the things that we've done, for example, with the Cipher System, and a lot of these are true of Invisible Sun as well, is we've taken a lot of the obligation to the rules away from the game master. So, for example, in the Cipher System, the game master doesn't roll dice. So basically, if the player characters are doing something, they roll dice to see if they succeed. Mm-hmm. And if someone is doing something to the player characters, right, they're being attacked, they have a spell cast on them, whatever, then they are rolling to defend against that thing. So the players are rolling all the dice, which puts a lot of the mechanical onus on the players, leaving the game master to be a lot more free to think about the story and what's going on and sort of the larger context of things, and not deep in the rules minutia. The games are meant to be really easy to prep. NPCs and creatures, for example, the characters that the game master is going to run are always very, very simple, and they're different. We don't use the same rules for player characters and non-player characters. Mm-hmm. So we can make player characters sort of as deep and interesting as we want without burdening the game master to have to basically make up a new player character every time he wants someone to walk on stage, so to speak. And so all of this is to just make that bring down the barriers, I think is a good way to look at it. A lot of people have come to me and said, I was always afraid to run a game. I didn't want to, try my hand at being a GM until I got Numenera, and then I thought, maybe I can do this, right? And that's really important to me because I think we've kind of created this idea in role-playing games that being the game master is really, really hard, and it's a lot of work, and being a player is where kind of the more relaxed fun is. And as someone who loves to game master, I want to dispel that, and I want to take those barriers down, and make it so that more people run games. And so far so good.
Now, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about that, because what you mentioned. First of all, people who know me, I've sort of shifted almost by necessity these days. But for the longest time, the thing that I DM'd in my home games and thing that I DM'd on stream, in fact, I have a game that's been running for about 3 years on Fridays. It's not on stream. We just play, we play on Roll20 between ourselves. I've been running Pathfinder for a very long time, so that's the system that I am probably the most comfortable with, the most familiar with, and I like Pathfinder because it has the most character options and stuff, because I am absolutely a glutton for, even if I don't use them, I love looking down a list of like cool descriptors of classes, like this is a poisoner alchemist, or this is a spear fighter, like a polearm fighter, or like I love looking down the list of those things and just getting inspired by the names of them, even if I don't want to use the mechanics of that actual like archetype or something, because that's how, a lot of times that's how I get an idea about what I want to do with an NPC or with a player character. I just find a cool piece of art or a cool description, and I try and build something based on that. But as you know, and obviously from writing for 3rd edition, it's a very, very clunky system, especially when it comes to the DM side. I am horrible at running spellcaster NPCs. Get me in combat with an enemy that casts spells, and I will spend 5 minutes per round deciding what they're gonna do, because I have to look up every spell, and I have to be like, oh, okay, would they do this? But no, they know this. Like, there's a lot of factors that go into sort of deciding. But what I had been recently talking about with is I wanted to run. I haven't run it in forever, but I wanted to run a dungeon crawl like Tomb of Horrors, because it's one of my favorites on stream. But I know that it plays, if you play it as with 3rd edition or with any other version of D&D, really, it tends to get very clunky. In that there's a lot of obviously there's a lot of enemy stuff to manage, trap stuff to manage that. And when you mentioned that you have a system where the DM doesn't actually have to roll anything, he just kind of says what happens, and it's up to the players to sort of react to that and to keep them, to save themselves from that, whether by rolling their defenses or how they want to, like. That's interesting to me, because one of the things that I talked about is I want to find a system, maybe not even D&D, that I can maybe run this game in that keeps the action interesting, keeps the sort of the tension up without bogging things down in the minutia of kind of trying to pick the okay, this is what this trap does, and this is how many attacks this guy gets per round, and that kind of thing. So that's why I kind of perked up my ears when you mentioned that, because I had never actually thought about that idea. That's really interesting.
Yeah, just that concept alone is something that I've seen people do as sort of house rules for other games as well. Mm-hmm. And it isn't that hard to implement. But taken as a whole, Tomb of Horrors is an interesting example, because of course it was written for a 1st edition D&D, and mm-hmm. so it comes from from a rules point of view, it comes from a simpler time. There weren't a lot of rules. 1st edition had its own sort of weird rules minutia, but in comparison, it probably didn't have the sort of minutia that Pathfinder does, for example. So I would say that choosing a game system like the Cypher system, like Numenera or whatever, is an interesting choice to emulate older versions of D&D, because it does have kind of a simpler, you're more interested in the story that's going on and the interaction of the players with what is the action and the events and everything than you are in making sure that the bugbear didn't move 5 feet more than he should have, or something, tactical like that. That's kind of true of the older editions of D&D, and it's sort of true of games like the Cypher system. So that is an interesting sort of thing. I find when I wrote the game mastering sections for Numenera and for the Cypher system rulebook, I found myself kind of just writing the way I used to run D&D way back in the day. And because I started in 77, so I started with the little booklets, and basically moved into first edition AD&D pretty quickly after that. And it was a very kind of different time with a different sensibility. And not to get too deep into game theory, but if you look at the game table as having like three sort of entities at it, and each one has a different amount of power, right? There's the game master, there's the players, and there's the rules. And certainly in the something like first edition D&D, the DM had all the power. And in a game more like Pathfinder, you might make the argument that the game system actually has the power of those three sitting at the table.
The players, if they know how to use it.
Yeah, but again, though, because they're using it, I mean, they're getting ahead, quote unquote, by using the rules.
Yeah,
so
no, I'm with you.
It's the rules who have the power, and the players just know how to work with it, right?
Yeah,
so,
I'm with you.
So, and let me be really, really clear. I'm not actually saying one of those is better than the other, because, I mean, obviously with the background in the games that I've worked on, I like all different kinds of games. But I will say that the Cypher system is designed so that the rules are the least powerful of the three, and that kind of more the players and the game master are sort of on equal footing.
Yeah, and I noticed that, and also it seems like that's actually where a lot of things have been leaning these days. D&D 5th edition is very heavily influenced by that kind of concept, by the kind of, I guess, the appearance and popularity of like rules light systems that kind of cropped up between Pathfinder sort of leveling off in its own thing and 4th edition kind of troughing. So like there was a big gap there that was filled by kind of lighter systems, like less rules heavy, and it seems like 5th edition very heavily influenced by that. So yeah, it's easy to see where where another system would fit into that paradigm.
Right. Well, you can see that as soon as you open up any 5th edition D&D book, and you will see words like this may happen, or if the GM wants the right, these kinds of qualifiers, right, are a interesting change in paradigm from what was probably, when it reached its apex, was probably 4th edition, where things just worked the way they worked, right? The rules were sort of the most important entity at the table. And that's cool, right? There's nothing wrong with that, because it certainly makes things clear, right? It certainly makes things so that there's not very many questions, right? And if you're not the kind of person who can, kind of make judgment calls on the fly, right? The rules just kind of tell you what to do, and that's cool. But it's a very different paradigm than earlier editions and now 5th edition.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, and that's why I said like that was what kind of perked my ears up, because, and especially this is not. I had a conversation about this recently, and it's like, bear in mind, I'm not talking just about run it, like actually running a normal game of D&D. Like, you can run Tomb of Horrors in your system, and it can be fun. It'll be fun, and it'll be fun for your players. I was talking specifically about running a game for like a live stream where you're doing it for an audience, where the entertainment is important, which means that often in those kind of things, the energy can kind of dip when the players take too long to sort of engage with the mechanic, or a fight goes too long, and this and that. So, you know, it was in my mind was like, I want to do this, but I'd like to find a way to do it where the system kind of works with us to constantly keep things energetic and keep things moving. And that's, you know, so that's kind of where the seed was birthed in me. And were I a game designer, that's probably what would have inspired me to start writing something.
Well, I think that's very wise. If you're going to have, you know, something that people are going to watch, the last thing that you want people to do is watch them look up rules in a rule book. Right? That's not very entertaining.
Well, and that's a whole new world, right? To start thinking about designing games, it was sort of the esports element in mind, right? The sort of traditionally role-playing games haven't been something that that people have watched. It hasn't been a spectator sport, you know, maybe one or two, and it certainly hasn't been designed for that. So like that's an interesting move into the future where we you know, we start seeing more and more things that people are actually engaging in role-playing games by being the audience. And how will that change how they work and how the games are designed and how the GM runs a game and what the rules look like? I mean, that's a whole new world that's only just beginning. So it'll be really interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, it's you know, you have a lot of people that are, you know, a lot of people are broadcasting, and you know, it's becoming very popular both to listen to games and to watch them. And you know, so that means I don't necessarily know if that, like, when they sit down to design D&D 6th edition, like I don't know if that's going to be one of the things that's on their whiteboard. Like, how do we make this good for, because what are people doing? They're streaming D&D on, like, or they're making podcasts of 5th edition and stuff, you know, actual plays and stuff like that. It's a big market. So I don't know, is that going to be a thing that designers, you know, around the industry start putting into their design process? It'd be interesting. It'd certainly be interesting to see. Like,
since that was written on the proverbial whiteboard of 5th edition, I guarantee that it'll be important in 6th. That was already something that, you know, I worked on 5th edition for a time, and while we worked, that was one of the many things that we sort of had in mind, was that, you know, it's a very different world out there now than it was in 1974, and you know, watching games, listening to games, playing games over the internet as opposed to around a table, that changes everything, right? Or maybe not everything, but a lot.
And sometimes systems sort of inadvertently make that happen. Like, we run an improv game at Gen Con every year for a search system where Monte, as our GM, goes to the audience without us players in the room and says, all right, give me the theme, give me the, you know, the main plot points, give me the villain. And then he comes out and says, you're playing superhero sidekicks, make your character, let's go play. And so, you know, the cyber system wasn't built for that sort of audience participation improv, but because it is fast-paced, requires not very much prep, and doesn't require a whole lot of focused rules from the GM, it allows us to sort of just run with that. And it's been pretty good. I mean, we've had hundreds of people in the audience. It's very fun and funny, and that's just one of the ways I think we're moving into that space.
And it's all on YouTube if you want to watch it. So
yeah,
if anybody here is watching and they want, it's fun. We have guest players like the Dungeon Bastard, for example, if you know who that is, and we had Jen Page. Exactly. We had Jen Page from the Gamers movies, and it's a lot of fun. It's very funny. You can't be taken very seriously, but you know, it's worth a view.
Speaking of I was going to sort of segue in it to another. I'm working on my segue game, so I was gonna jump into it a little bit earlier, but you mentioned the Gamers movies. I actually just had some of the guys on last week to talk, and one of the things we got talking about at the end when I had mentioned the next show, I was talking with Ben Dobbins about my favorite thing that Monte has written, which I have read quite a bit of, but I've never had a chance to use, which is the Ptalis book.
Oh, cool. Yeah. It's actually the 10th anniversary of Talus is this summer. It came out 10 years ago, and it it actually has interesting links back to it from Invisible Sun, not in theme, but in sort of some of the core genesis of the idea. I mean, when I created Talus, I wanted to create something really special, something that no one had seen before, something that was big and beautiful and deluxe. And, an Invisible Sun is kind of the same thing, although it's big and beautiful and deluxe in a different way. And I think that, when I hear myself talk about this stuff, I realize that what that comes from is, my just absolute love of role-playing games, right? And my belief that role-playing games, deserve kind of the royal treatment a little bit, or at least now and again, right? I'm not saying that every role-playing game product needs to be some high-end thing. For example, this fall we're coming out with a starter set for Numenera that's quick, easy, and it costs $25, right? And you get the whole game, and you're ready to play that night. And so, I also believe in, having things that are, affordable to anyone from any means, and whatnot. But, when it comes to these bigger products, it's just because I love them so much, right? I want to sort of lavish beautiful, cool things on them. And that's kind of where Talus came from.
Yeah. By the way, do you want to briefly explain what that is to many of the people in chat because I feel like I'm the only one who knows what that is these days. Like
Talus?
Yeah.
So Talus is I can't remember, 642 page book or something like that.
Yeah.
It's this big hardcover book. It's got multiple cloth bookmarks and a textured cover, and it comes with a big envelope full of player handouts and a map and everything, and the whole thing is a campaign setting. And the idea here, and in fact it is the campaign setting that I used as my home campaign setting while we were building 3rd edition D&D. So it is a D20 product. It is sort of I used to describe it as D&D with the volume turned up to 11. So dungeons and monsters and all kinds of things going on. There's enough material in this book for basically 2 campaigns, levels 1 to 20. And I know that isn't just hyperbole. I know that because I ran 2 campaigns, levels 1 to 20, using that material. It's a lot of fun. It's very in depth, and one of the things that I learned when we created Talus is it is not built like a regular RPG source book. It is actually built using the model of a travel guide, and so. It takes a lot of the same lessons. For example, when you're going through the portions that are talking about the various parts of the city, in the corner of every single page there is a map of the city that shows exactly the location of what you're talking about, so you never get lost. Whenever a important person, place, object, spell, whatever is mentioned in the text, it is highlighted in a special color, and then you look off to the side and you will find more information about that thing, or a page reference where you can find more information about that thing. So it's sort of the closest you can get to being hyperlinked in a physical object, right? And in fact, that latter thing is a lesson that I have taken with me and taken to heart. And now I think that's the way all RPG products should be done. So all MCG products use that same model of lots of references within the book or to the rule book or whatever. Because, again, I'm all about making the GM's life easier. And the last thing that you want to do when you're running a game is come upon something and you're like, I don't remember where the stats for that guy are, and then you're just flipping through books and you're totally lost and you're slowing the game down. So, but if every time that guy's mentioned, if the page where his stats is right there next to him, you're never going to get lost.
Yeah, no, like I said, it's one of my favorite products only because I never got a chance to use it. I read enough of it. I read the first 150 to 200 pages, and I still feel like I know so little about that city that I probably couldn't do it justice. But what it did do is it did spark my interest to run a game that Paizo actually filled that niche for when they came out with the Adventure Path Curse of the Crimson Throne, which is a campaign that is designed to take place entirely within one city. It's not actually as big or as detailed as Talus. There is a whole guide that goes with it, and I gave that guide, Paizo's guide, to my players to read, so they could kind of pick out the details that they, of the city that they liked and they wanted to focus on. But it's certainly not a 600-page book where every house and shop and stuff is detailed, with the stat and the guy who runs it, and their little family it's not that detailed. But it was definitely one of those catalysts that made me really, really interested in urban fantasy.
Cool. Yeah, Talus isn't quite that detailed either. It focuses
felt like
more
it when I read it.
Sure. It focuses more on the interesting, people and not just like Joe Shopkeeper. But it gives enough information so that if the player characters want to, need to go buy a new sword, there's a cool place for them to go buy a new sword.
Yeah, I recommend. Hearn says it's been on my DT Drive-Thru RPG wish list since I missed the discount during the original Numenera campaign. I would suggest picking it up. There is a PDF version, which I have somewhere, which is cool. I think that was originally on CD, wasn't it? It came with a CD, I think.
Talus, yes. It came with a CD that had a whole bunch more content. So you could have the ability to print out they had player handouts and things like that as well, and lots of extra stuff. I'm a big fan of things like player handouts and stuff that you can actually give to a player and they can hold in their hands. Again, I think that's kind of a theme here of things that have a tactile, visceral experience.
Yeah, definitely. No, I just wanted to make sure I got to mention in that because it's probably one of the books I remember owning very, very fondly from when I started being a DM, and I don't know, it was one of those I read it and there was factions and all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, man, I feel like one day I'll be a good enough DM that I can actually keep all this stuff straight in my head. Until that day, I'll whatever, I'll just be mediocre. No, we're kind of coming up on the halfway point of the show, or the kind of rollover point. So it is 9 o'clock, and I do want to get some questions from chat because I know you guys in chat who are hanging out definitely have some stuff you want to ask. So for those, let me just !Fuzzy in chat to remind you that you guys are hanging out here watching the Fuzzy Dice show here on the Exploding Dice channel, where I've got the awesome Monte Cook and SHANNA Germain hanging out and talking about Invisible Sun and Numenera and Cypher System and a whole bunch of other stuff. If you have anything you want to ask, just throw your questions right in chat. And we will happily discuss them. If you have posted a question in chat and I missed it, just go ahead and repost it. It's not a big deal. I'm happy to check that out. Zern says it was also featured as part of the bundle of holding a while back. I don't know. I don't pay attention with it. The only thing I really, really buy a ton of these days is modules. I am a hoarder of adventure modules because I'm not a very good writer, as anyone knows. So that's where I get all my inspiration from. Is I just steal them from people who are writers.
Cool.
So
I love features too. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's I think all of my campaigns are probably made up of snipped bits and pieces that I've taken from modules, things from both Dungeon Magazine and the old AEG things that they used to publish for 3rd edition, and I have all those just stored away on a hard drive somewhere. Billiam Babel says, it's nice to hear someone confess to not being confident enough to run a system or setting. DM anxiety is a real thing. I owned Talus when I was like, oh god, how old was I? I was like 16 or 17 at the time. No. Yeah, I must have been 17 or 18 at the time. And I was just getting into D&D and DMing after, like, my friend, I'd been playing with my friends on the summers, like, at summer camp, and I didn't know, and all I know is the first campaign I tried to write and I tried to run was horrible, and after that I realized just how much I needed to learn in order to become a decent DM, and I don't know if I've solved that problem yet, but we're working on it.
I think that running games is one of those things that you never stop learning new stuff, right? You never stop growing.
Yeah, I think I was lucky enough that I grew up as an artist. I went to art school and stuff, so that sort of always be learning something new is something that kind of is ingrained. Just sort of it happens to be ingrained into who I am. So luckily, and that's kind of what led me to have a show specifically about DMing, is because like I always want to learn something new. I want to talk to people who have different perspectives and philosophies and ideas, than I do, and then hopefully I can walk away from every encounter, saying like, oh, that's a cool thing. I may try that, and maybe it'll make my games a little bit better next time. Which I encourage, by the way, I encourage everyone in chat, everyone who's hanging out, always try, like, seek out other people, watch other broadcasts and podcasts and actual plays, and listen to other things, of DMs, and you will find people who do things that you really, really like, and you're like, oh, I can do that, and that'll work better in my game. Hearn says, where did the idea of the ARG in the campaign come from? Will it continue after the campaign? I don't know what the ARG stands for offhand. I may have missed that.
What he's referring to is throughout the Invisible Sun Kickstarter campaign, we are doing some interesting things. We are we've scattered some caches of interesting things for people to find all across. Well, it used to be all across the United States, but now it's all across the world. We have sort of embedded some mysteries and puzzles and secrets in the web pages and whatnot that we've created to help promote the Kickstarter. And so, this is ongoing. The goal here is the discovery of secrets, which is, of course, the goal of the player characters in the game. So that's why we've done it that way. And we have also incorporated that into the game itself. We call the box that the game comes in, we call it the Black Cube. And you will find that within the Black Cube and the components and all those things that we were talking about, if you go to the Kickstarter page and you see all that stuff kind of splayed out there of all the things you'll get in your cube, there are puzzles and mysteries even woven into all of that, which kind of creates a whole different way to interact with the game, just on a personal level, right? When you're just kind of sitting there looking at the stuff, you might find interesting, weird things going on in an image in one of the books, and that might make you look at an image in one of the other books, and you can piece those together and find something interesting going on there. So in a way, that level of the experience will continue. It will continue as we get into the the actual release of the game, and there might very well be things in the game itself that lead people to new weird things that we have put on the internet, and there will be mysteries to solve. And so while that's not a part of the actual game itself, I mean, in the purest form, it's a traditional tabletop role-playing game, but that aspect of the kind of that other level in which you can interact with the game will indeed continue.
So as an addendum, I kind of want to ask both of you a little bit. How do you go about designing those things? Like, do you just kind of like look at your stuff and saying like, where can we fit little details here, or is it all premeditated? Like, is it all kind of a part of whatever purpose those things serve in the game?
It's quite premeditated. A lot of it starts with the themes that come from the setting, and the ideas that are important in the setting, and how can we turn that, just some straightforward idea, how can we turn that into a secret and a mystery that someone can uncover on their own? So for example, clocks are an object that features in the game, and so on the web pages that we created on InvisibleSunRPG.com, there are clock faces on the various pages on that website that are referred to from the Kickstarter page, and within those clock faces is in fact a puzzle of sorts, or maybe multiple puzzles. That lead to the discovery of secrets that lead people to new web pages, and it's really exciting. In fact, on Google Plus, there is a whole community of it's like 700 people now, almost, I think, who dedicated just to that aspect of Invisible Sun and uncovering these mysteries. And so it's really fun to watch them. It's in fact very, very much like being a game master for a very large group, and watching them kind of solve the puzzles and interact with things that you've set in motion.
Yeah. Shanna, do you want to have any input on sort of designing those kind of secrets and stuff?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, my background goes back as a writer. And so one of the things that for me as a writer is really important is that everything has to have at least a purpose, and ideally has three. And in writing, those three things are everything that you write needs to entertain the reader, it needs to reveal character, and it needs to move the plot forward. And if it doesn't do those things, then it's extraneous. And I feel that way about game design too. Like everything that I try to put into a game, or everything that's in there, it needs to have multiple purposes. And so most of the time, those aren't even things that the players see, or if you're reading a book, you probably don't notice, but it's sort of this undercurrent beneath kind of the top story that I think gives it a lot of depth and sort of hits those maybe subconscious or unconscious elements of us as humans. And so it's interesting to watch Invisible Sun being designed, because those things are right on the surface, right? Like Monte said, here's these clocks, and it's clear that they have at least 2 or 3 meanings, and they might have 5 or 6, and you just don't know. And so it's really like watching this sort of a beautiful tapestry being woven, where you can kind of see the threads and you think you know what's going on, and then as you look at it closer, you uncover more things. And that's one of the things that I love about designing and writing, is that you get to hide all of these things, and maybe no one will ever notice, but someone somewhere is going to discover it. And there's this fantastic moment, like watching the Invisible Sun group on G+, like they are breaking these secrets open faster than we expected, because they're so dedicated and they're so smart and they're so creative. And so you're like, oh my gosh, they're gonna figure this out, and they get really close, and there's this impulsiveness to like help them, but you're like, no, just let them figure it out. And so there's just something so rewarding about that, about creating this thing that people pay attention to and find inspiring and feel good about unweaving a little bit.
That's really interesting. I actually by the way, I liked that thing you said about sort of writing points and the 3 purposes that they should attempt to touch, because again, I'm not a writer, and so whenever someone tells me something about writing, like I try and file it away, because in my head, like if I can add that into the way I prep I prep my D&D games, and the way I write the stories and attempt to deliver them to my players, then in theory it should make those things better, provided I can accomplish that task. so that's like I hadn't actually heard anyone say that specifically, so it's like that's one of those things where it's like, okay, so now when I you know, now I know when I sit down to write my session for Friday game, because I know what's going to happen on Friday. In essence, I know what they're going to set off to do, because they were just given a task, but I don't really know anything beyond that except what's going to happen when they get there. So when I sit down and I do my prep, now I know in my head I'm gonna think like, okay, what am I revealing to them, and does it do the, like, does it give them new information, does it progress the plot, right? You know, and I have a feeling that most of the things will kind of just naturally do that, but it's one of those things where it's gonna be stuck in my head, and I'm gonna constantly do that forever. So thank you for that.
If you're smart, get your players to do that for you. Like, that to me is one of the big differences between writing and running a game, is that in writing I have to do all those things, but in running a game I can get the players to entertain each other, I can get them to reveal character, I can get them to advance the plot. And so for me, that's one of the main differences between creating like a novel and creating a game book, is that in the novel I have to do all those things, and in a game book I give them the way to do all those things. And so, like, even as a GM, sometimes I put that onus on the players, like, all right, you know, figure out how to entertain yourselves, figure out how to reveal your characters, and like you give them the sort of the jump off points, but then they end up doing all the work, which is kind of nice.
I think in theory I always intend to do that, which is to put sort of the story control, and like put it in the hands of the players to say, okay, reveal stuff about your character, you know, reveal interesting things, and, you know, make decisions that move the plot forward. But a lot of the times I find it's they almost don't, like, they don't really know where to begin with those things, and they don't even know that you're actually encouraging them to do that. You know, they're literally just thinking like, okay, I'm playing and I'm waiting for something to happen. You know, so players will, like, if you encourage them or you let them go, they may go into like a tangent where they just sort of talk around a bar table about each other, or, you know, one player may talk about how he really likes drinking, and then they'll just discuss antics back and forth. And as a DM, you know, that's when I tend to sit back and like tune out a little bit to what they're saying and focus on what I'm prepping to come up next. But it becomes a little bit harder for me to actually say, like, for me to encourage that sort of same behavior, but in a less what's the word, in a less jovial but maybe more of a serious atmosphere, you know, like get them to actually start talking about the world and stuff around them, rather than them just sit around and, you know, make jokes to each other, because that part's you can get them to do that's easy, but it's slightly harder to get them to actually work out the world around them without prompting. And so I'm always trying to find new ways of encouraging that. I didn't want to miss it, by the way. Fenka, I don't know how to pronounce that name. I'm gonna call him Fence. Fence he says, any tips on designing a world for a Cypher System campaign? That sounds like a very broad question.
That's a very broad question. I think that step one is to figure out what your character types are, because you're going to find that the character types are going to help you define the world, and your world is going to help you define the character types. So you know that you probably want sort of the core archetypes of player characters involved, right? You want a guy who's probably good at combat, and another person who's maybe sneaky, or someone, you know, depending on the setting. If it's a science fiction setting, you want someone who's you know, good with tech and those kinds of things. But beyond that, you want to think about how those different things fit into the world, and how they you know, once you kind of get past the game mechanics and the names of the things that the players are going to use, how do people in the world actually interact with these people, right? Do they if your fightery type guy is a soldier, does that mean that there are lots of soldiers in the world? It implies that, and So why is that? Is there a lot of war going on? And is it a very militaristic society? You suddenly kind of allow what starts as sort of a game mechanic. It starts as my players want there to be this thing, but it blossoms into actually world building. And I think that if you allow that to happen, it becomes a very natural sort of progression, and you don't want to get in the way of that, right? And so, if you do that right, you will end up with a world that is fun to play in because it is, in fact, the play that has inspired the world.
Yeah, I think you're right in the sense that like it's very possible, because when you say how do you design a world for a system that, especially a system that isn't really extremely specific on what the characters can be and what the world can be, like it's a very broad question. So you could always try, like Monte said, listen, just put the players together in a group, kind of like what they were talking about with the live game, which is where first you talk to the audience and you say, okay, create a world for us, create a setting, and then the players will create characters to fit that, because we'll tell them you're playing in a superhero game, create super. But if you do, you could also reverse that where you say like, okay, put your players in a room together and have them work out their characters, and when they say like, okay, we're a bunch of guys that, we're traveling mercenaries. Okay, well now you can literally just spin that off into a world around them, say like, okay, yes, you're one mercenary company in a world where there's lots of mercenary companies and you're all competing for contracts. Or, I don't know, something else, like maybe they're in a world where they're hunting monsters, or maybe they're, whatever it is, they, but if you could let your players decide what they want to play, and then give them something to do based on that. Or you could say, I've always wanted to run a Japanese feudal society game. That's what we'll try that. And then give your players that information and see where they go from it. So there's no right way to start world building. It's you pick an end, I think, and you go from there.
I would also recommend thinking about the ciphers and how they are presented in your game. Ciphers are, of course, the core of the cipher system, and they come in various different forms and they work in different ways according to the world, and so that kind of gives you a grounding that I think can be really interesting. Are they a manifest object? Do they come sort of only via inspiration? Because that also, the thing that Monty's talking about, where the world builds the mechanics and the mechanics build the world, like the form in which ciphers come and the effects that they have are one of those really cool elements that I think can kind of really ground you because they're so vital.
Yeah, definitely. When, like I said, I can't offer a ton of advice on the mechanics specifically because I know only enough to talk about the system, not enough to DM it myself. But I think world building is kind of one of those universal things where it's you find out what where you're gonna start, and you find out how you're gonna work all those things into the world. Hearn, by the way, she said, "Death in Invisible Sun sounds as if it's not the terrible termination of a character that has come in some RPGs. Can you say more about it? I love the idea of higher stakes than life or death."
Sure. So he or she is absolutely correct. Death does not mean that you're done. In Invisible Sun, it is death, the land of the dead, whatever you want to call it, is one of the places on the Path of Suns. It's called the Pale Sun, and you can exist in the game as a ghost, basically, and can still continue to operate. You can work toward your own resurrection. You can just go off into pale sun, into the pale, and continue having your adventures there, right? Because that's a whole nother level of reality that you can interact with, and maybe eventually decide to come back. Now, none of those things are quite as easy as I, throw them out there, of course, right? Because it's a role-playing game, and there's got to be challenges and difficulties and whatnot. But it is interesting. I don't want Invisible Sun to be a game where you just have to stop playing because you're out of points or I won't get into the mechanics of how health works, but if you that fatal blow, basically, you don't have to leave the table and go home. It changes the way things work, and so it's a transition, not an ending. And that, in fact, is sort of a theme, right? Even the Path of Suns itself, when you reach the end of the path just doubles back on itself, and you go back through it again, called the Nightside Path. There are no endings. They're just transitions. You just keep going. Now, of course, in Invisible Sun, while death may not be the end, there are still stakes involved, and an important part of Invisible Sun is a character's very soul, and what happens to the soul in various situations, and like the questioner said, right? It could be worse, bigger than just simply death, depending on the situation and who you're interacting with.
When you say it could be bigger, are you talking like from a story perspective, or like
yes.
So the interesting thing to me is, or the thing I wanted to focus just a tiny bit on, is when you say, like, okay, so we're taking away the concept that once you hit 0 hit points, your character dies and you just roll a new one. That's off the table. So when your character essentially hits 0 hit points, he starts, let's call it ghost phase, right? He moves into that sort of that realm of whatever. But does that mean there's still, like, do the players still not, like, is there a reason for them to not want to die? Or is there something that encourages them to, like, to not just sort of embrace those things?
Well, it like so many things in Invisible Sun, it depends on the player and it depends on the character. It is not the kind of situation necessarily where death has no price tag associated with it, and I don't mean like in money. I mean like there are costs. Like I said, right? This is a role-playing game, and so there's always challenges involved, and there is, of course, the concept of once you go to the Pale and you are within the realm of the dead, what happens to those people eventually? And there is an idea of the death of the dead, and so there's a lot of levels going on here, and again, remember, this is a game of surreal fantasy, so there's some strange things and conceptual stuff going on here, but it is the kind of thing where a player there might be at least temporarily advantages to being dead. You might gain different abilities that could be of use to you in whatever it is you're trying to accomplish if you're a ghost rather than a corporeal being. But you might say, well, but I don't want to be a ghost forever, right? I want to come back, I want to be alive, I want to do the things that I was doing and go back to my house and all these things, right? So you might sort of embrace death for a while and then embrace your new incorporeal state and your new abilities that you're granted in that, but eventually you want to say, well, how do I come back? And that, of course, is a process. There's challenges involved, and you have to find the right secrets and the right spells and whatnot to bring a character back. And each one of those is a story unto itself. I mean, that's really the goal here, right? Is that we want to make each one of these interesting experiences a memorable story and a part of the character's story arc. And so all of these things are sort of deliberately designed to be interesting transitions, not just, oh, sorry, you're done.
That's a really interesting concept, because I think as a DM, one of the things I embraced a while ago was when I was running adventure paths and stuff. I used to keep heavy track of experience, right? Like in Pathfinder stuff. And then I realized like all that was doing was limiting the amount of time that I had to tell the story that I'm trying to tell. And I don't want to be limited. I'd like to take as much time as it's going to take. And because I really like padding out a campaign with with other things, because I just think that's cool. It's the opportunity to do more stuff. And to me, as a DM, like anything that a player's going to do that I can turn into gameplay, I probably will. And whether that could be literally anything from like crafting an item that they want to craft, or maybe hunting down the raw materials to do the thing, or it could be like maybe they don't really like their like they in Pathfinder, maybe they picked one of my players picked an archetype for the swashbuckler that he's not really feeling anymore, because he doesn't want to use a katana, he wants to use a rapier. And so I said, okay, we'll find a way that you can find a trainer, and we'll make this into a thing. It will be a part of your character arc.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. Bruce Cordella's here dropping off boxes, so I'm going to go back in.
We're yeah.
Yeah, no, that actually, I wanted to make that the last little question we touched on, and it was just, I felt like I wanted to mention that, because that was that was kind of a philosophy that I stumbled on as a DM, and it's like it's worked well for me. Anything you can turn into gameplay, you should, because your players will have it adds to their character, I think. Oh man, so yeah, Fence just sent a big question in, but I don't know if we're gonna have time to get to that. I guess.
Great. We have so half of our team is gonna go to PAX this weekend, and the other half is going to Dragon Con. So we have sort of a whole bunch of things to deal with here in the next this evening and tomorrow. So I'm afraid I'm gonna have to probably take my leave.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was because we are just coming up on 9:30. So while we unfortunately have to wrap this show up just a little early, I do have, of course, a couple of announcements and stuff I want to make. But before I do that, I want to give a huge thanks to both Monte Cook and SHANNA GERMAIN for being awesome and coming out and hanging out with me and discussing their stuff from their stuff with us, and also taking your questions. So definitely let them know, like, give them a thanks in chat, and if you haven't already, hit them up on Twitter and tell them that they're great for doing what they're doing. Before we bounce out of here, Monte, do you want to give a quick rundown of where everyone can find you, where they can kind of look up your stuff?
The absolute best place is montecookgames.com. I'm Monte J. Cook on Twitter. But if you go to montecookgames.com, you'll find a link to our current Kickstarter, to our web store, and you can read more about all of our various products. We try to keep that updated with news and interesting articles all the time. So please check that out. And we're on Facebook and, all the normal places.
Yeah. So absolutely, you got links to both of their Twitters in chat, and also Monte Cook Games. Go check that out. Go check out the Kickstarter for Invisible Sun if you have not thrown a couple dollars into the hat, or a lot if you want to buy a box, because it does have a little bit of price tag on it, but it hopefully is going to be very well worth it. Go definitely do that. And a big thanks for both of them for hanging out. Before we get out of here, I do have some announcements to make, because I have to go over my schedule and stuff. As you can see, down on this side, you have all the upcoming stuff where both I and my crew are appearing with. Obviously, on Encounter Roleplay, I stream at 1 p.m. on Thursdays. We have Outlanders, which is a game in a very, very strange setting where very, very strange things happen. And also on Wednesday at 4 p.m. we have our finale of Call of Cthulhu, the second season of Call of Cthulhu on Encounter Roleplay, where we will be hopefully solving the mystery of the Dagon cult and all that stuff. And we're ending that season because right after that we are jumping right into a brand new season of Storm King's Thunder run on Roll20. So it should be a great time. Also, every Sunday here on Exploding Dice, we have live D&D. We're playing the Jade Regent campaign. That's Sundays at 8 p.m., so you should definitely tune in for that if you need your D&D fix. I announced it earlier. We do have an extra Fuzzy Dice episode this Thursday where I'm hanging out with the Experience Points show. We're going to be premiering episode 10 of their web series. They normally go up on Sunday, but you can exclusively see it early and watch it live with us on Thursday. That's also going to be at 8 p.m. And just one last thing, coming up, where's my calendar? Coming up in September. So we're going to be starting a giveaway very, very soon, because on September 20th, I'm going to be hanging out with Mr. Mike Merles, and he's going to be here talking about the new Storm King's Thunder book and all of that good stuff that Wizards is doing. Leading up to that, however, we're going to be running a huge giveaway of both a copy of Storm King Thunder and some other stuff. So watch the Twitter for that. It's just ! social in chat will get you to the Twitter. Just watch it, and all the information will be there. Big thanks to everyone for coming out. Thank you guys for hanging out with us, and I hope to see you during the week. And as always, try not to let Dice Thulu get his tentacles on you, because he always gets a little handsy when he does. We will see you around. Take care, guys, and hi, Will. We're just bouncing out of here. Bye-bye.